Okay, so y'all know every year there's that one or two or a few teams that come out of nowhere. You're like, man, I did not see them having a great year. And then there's some teams that you expect to do well, and they don't. Well, I have a few teams in mind that I think are going to skyrocket and that are going to free fall. Let's go. What's going on, everybody? It's me again, Golden Blue Dude, and if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. I do videos every single day, sometimes college football, sometimes college basketball, and the best way to support this channel is just hit the subscribe button. First, I'm going to talk about the free fallers. The first one I want to talk about is Indiana. Yeah, I did not expect Indiana to do as well as they did. They finished the season 6-2. Second in the Big Ten East. Well, this year I don't expect them to do as well. Their quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., he got injured, and I don't know if he's going to be at 100%. Plus, their schedule doesn't do them any favors either, and they only had the number 62 recruiting class in the nation for 2021. Yikes. How far do they fall? First game at Iowa. That's a loss. That's not a good start. They get Idaho at home. That's a win. Cincinnati, that's a loss. At Western Kentucky, win. At Maryland, win, but that'll be a tough win. At Michigan, I think that's a loss. I think Michigan's going to be better this year. Home against Rutgers, win. At Penn State, loss. Penn State's going to be back too. Home against Ohio State, big loss. Home against Michigan State, win. At Purdue, loss. Yes, I think Purdue's going to be better too. So that leaves us with a 6-6 record. That's still enough to get to a bowl, but they're definitely not finishing second in the Big Ten East. The second team I want to talk about as far as free fallers, staying in the Big Ten, Northwestern. They finished 7-2, first in the Big Ten East. Their quarterback, Ramsey, he's decided he's not sticking around, so he's gone. They have the number 60 recruiting class ranking. That doesn't help, and they have a tough schedule. We forget, during the COVID season, the schedule shrank. So we're going to see a lot more of these teams this year in 2021. Let's look at their schedule real quick. Home against Michigan State, I do think they get the revenge. That's a win. Home against Indiana State, that's a win. At Duke, I'm going to say a loss, but they could win that game. Home against Ohio, win. Home against Iowa, loss. Iowa's going to be a really good team next year. At Nebraska, win. Home against Minnesota, win. At Wisconsin, loss. At Michigan, loss. Home against Rutgers, win. Home against Purdue, loss. And at Illinois, that's a win. So they go from 7-2 to 7-5. So it's not terrible. That's still a winning season, but that's picking up 3 more losses. You'll get to a bowl, though. Next team on this list of free fallers, Oklahoma State. They finished third in the Big 12 with an 8-3 record. With head coach Mike Gundy. He's an okay coach, but man, he had a lot to work with last year and did hardly anything. He had a better defense than offense, and it was the offense that was supposed to be something special. Number 37 recruiting class ranking. That's not terrible, but not great, and he really doesn't do much with it. Let's look at the 2021 schedule for the Cowboys. They start off with a game against Mississippi State. I actually think that's going to be a loss because it's going to be against Mike Leach, and he thrives in the Big 12 atmosphere. Home against Tulsa, win. At Boise State, I think that's going to be a tough road loss. At Iowa State, another tough road loss. Home against Baylor, that's a win. Home against Kansas, that's a win. Home against Kansas State, that's a loss. I think Kansas State's going to be better than people realize as well. Home against Oklahoma, big loss. Home against TCU, that's a win. At Texas, loss. At Texas Tech, win. At West Virginia, that's a loss too. Have Oklahoma State going from 8-3 to either 5-7 or 6-6, and I think it's time to say bye-bye to Mike Gundy. These last two really might surprise you. Next on my free follower list, Notre Dame. They finished first in the ACC in 2020. Brian Kelly, their head coach, he is a good coach, but he's never been able to find that high-powered offense, some great defenses. You just can't find the juice for offense. He did have the number 9 recruiting class ranking for 2021. That's really good, but it's their schedule that kind of makes me raise my eyebrow. They start out at Florida State. That's a win. Home against Toledo. That's a win. Home against Purdue. I'll give them a win. A neutral game against Wisconsin in Chicago. That's a loss. Then a game against Cincinnati. That's going to be a loss. At Virginia Tech. Loss. Home against USC. Loss. Home against North Carolina. Loss. That is a 5-game losing streak. Home against Navy. That's a win. At Virginia. Win. Home against Georgia Tech. Win. And then at Stanford. Win. I have Notre Dame going from 10-2 to either 7-5 or 8-4. 8-4 is more probable, but still, that 5-game losing streak seems very, very possible. Last but not least on my free follower list, BYU. They went 11-1 in 2020. Their only loss was to Coastal Carolina, and it was only by 2 yards. Number 72 recruiting class ranking, but biggest deal for BYU is they lose a ton of talent. Let's look at their schedule real quick. They start off with a game against Arizona in Las Vegas. That's a win. Home against Utah, that's a loss. Home against Arizona State, another loss. Home against South Florida, that's a win. At Utah State, that's a win. Home against Boise State, that's a loss. At Baylor, give you a win. At Washington State, that's a loss. Home against Virginia, win. Home against Idaho State, win. At Georgia Southern, this might surprise you, loss. Georgia Southern's going to be good. At USC, that's a loss. So I have BYU going from 11-1 to 6-6. Not a losing season. You'll still get to a bowl, but man, y'all lose a ton of talent over at BYU. Now let's start looking at the positive side of things, my high risers. The first one on the list is going to be Arizona State. The first thing that popped out to me was they actually finished number 15 in the S&P rankings. That thing takes everything into consideration. Really, if you think about it, we only had 4 games to judge how Arizona State was. Jaden Daniels, their quarterback, he'll be a Heisman Trophy contender next year. Don't forget about head coach Herm Edwards. He's getting those guys to play very hard for him. Last year they finished 4th in the Pac-12 South. I think they'll do much better in 2021. Let's look at their schedule. Start off with a home game against Southern Utah. That's a win. Home against UNLV. Win. At BYU. That's a win. Home against Arizona. Big win. Home against Colorado. Another win. Home against Stanford. Another win. Home against USC. I'm going to give you guys a loss. Home against Washington State. Win. At Oregon State. Win. At UCLA. Win. At Utah. Loss. I think Utah is going to be back this year. At Washington. That's going to be a loss. So I have Arizona State going from 2-2 to 9-3, possibly with an outside chance of having a 10-win season. Next up on my high risers is going to be Kansas State. They finished 7th in the Big 12, went 4-6. They have a national championship coach in Chris Kleinman. He coached North Dakota State to many FCS national championships. I'm not saying Kansas State is going to the national championship, but they are going to be much better this year. I think it all starts with the health of Skylar Thompson. The number 52 recruiting class ranking, that's not great, but it'll help plug some holes here and there. But they return a ton of talent. Let's look at their schedule. First game, a home game against Stanford, that's a win. Home against Southern Illinois, that's a win. Home against Nevada, tough, but win. At Kansas, win. Home against Baylor, win. Home against Iowa State, a much-needed win. Home against Oklahoma, that's where they grab a loss. Home against TCU, that's a win. Home against West Virginia, that's a win. At Oklahoma State, that's a win. At Texas, that's where I'll say they'll lose. Probably in an upset, though. At Texas Tech, win. So, I have Kansas State going from 4-6 to either 10-2 or 9-3. I'm definitely leaning more towards 10-2. So, yes, I'm thinking that Kansas State is going to have a 10-win season in 2021 and compete for the Big 12 championship. Next team on the high riser is going to be UCF. They finished 4th in the AAC. I think they'll be back this year. Great head coach in Josh Heupel and quarterback Dylan Gabriel will be back. He'll be a Heisman Trophy contender as well. Number 61 recruiting class ranking. Look, I think UCF can do better than that. I think that's low for them, so come on guys, y'all can do better than that. Let's look at their schedule. First game, it's going to be a test. Home against Boise State, but I'm going to say a win. At Louisville, I'm going to say that's a loss. I think Louisville is going to be back. Home against UConn, win. At Cincinnati, another loss. At Navy, win. At SMU, win. I don't think SMU will be as good next year. At Temple, win. Home against East Carolina, win. Home against Memphis, big win. Home against Tulane, win. And then home against South Florida. I have UCF going from 6-4 to 9-2. And yes, I double-checked the schedule. It only has 11. Next on the list is going to be Arkansas. They went 3-7, finished 6th in the SEC West. Head coach Sam Pittman has this team going in the right direction, and they do get quarterback Felipe Franks, the transfer from Florida, back because last year wasn't counted because of COVID. And they have the number 21 recruiting class ranking. That's pretty good. Let's look at their schedule. Home game against Rice, win. Home game against Texas, I'm going to say win. Home against Georgia Southern, tough win, but a win. At Texas A&M, I'm going to say a loss. Home against Arkansas Pine Bluff, win. Home against Missouri, win. At Alabama, loss. Home against Auburn, that's going to be a win. Home against Mississippi State, that's going to be a win. At Georgia, that'll be a loss. At LSU, win. At Ole Miss, loss. I have Arkansas going from 3-7 to 8-4, so not like a huge jump, but definitely a winning season and definitely going to a decent bowl. People forget they were 7 points away from being 6-4 instead of 3-7 this past year. I think they make a nice jump in 2021. Next on the list, and I really like this team, Louisville. They finished 4-7, 12th in the ACC. That surprised me, not gonna lie. I think they bounced back in a big way. Head coach Scott Satterfield, he's great. Before this past year, he had Louisville definitely in the right direction. I think the big bounce back is coming this year. Quarterback Malik Cunningham, he'll be back. The running game's going to be good. I think that defense will be better. Combine that with the number 36 recruiting class ranking, that's not too bad. And their schedule's not all that terrible either. They start out with a game against Ole Miss. I think they pull the win. They get a home game against Eastern Kentucky. That's a win. Home against UCF, I'm going to say a win. Home against Kentucky, win. At Duke, win. At Florida State, win. Home against Boston College, win. Home against Clemson, loss. Probably a big loss. Home against Syracuse, win. Home against Virginia, win. At NC State, that's where I'm going to give you another loss. At Wake Forest, I'll say that's a win. Have Louisville going from 4-7 to either 9-3 or 10-2. That's a pretty big jump with a possibility of having a 10-win season. Let's jump back to the Big Ten, my last two. The first one I want to talk about is Purdue. This one is more of a gut feeling. They finished 2-4, 6th in the Big Ten West. Head coach Jeff Brom, he has a lot of quarterback in his family, in his blood. Former college quarterback himself. He has the mentality for the job, and he has this team in the right direction. He played Iowa close, and he played Northwestern close in this past year. Not a great recruiting class, number 71, so that doesn't help, but I think the schedule sets up nicely. They start off with a game against Oregon State, that's a win. At UConn, that's a win. At Notre Dame, I'm going to say that's a loss. Home against Illinois, that's a win. Home against Minnesota, that's a win. At Ohio State, loss. Home against Nebraska, that's a win. At Iowa, loss. Close loss. Home against Michigan State, win. At Wisconsin, loss. But to end the season, at Northwestern, that's going to be a win. And then home against Indiana, that's also a win. So the turnaround looks like this. Going from 2-4 to either 8-4 or 9-3. That's a big jump for Purdue. Last team I want to talk about, Michigan. They finished 6th in the Big Ten East with an abysmal 2-4 record. Jim Harbaugh just got extended, but his salary was cut in half and his buyout was shrunk to almost nothing. So it's all up to him, and if he can get back to winning, there's those incentives in there to where he can go back to the salary where he was at, being one of the top paid coaches in the nation. Number 13 recruiting class ranking for 2021, that's a good start. Let's look at their schedule. Start off with a home game against Western Michigan. That's a win. A game against Washington, that'll be a test, but I think Michigan wins. Home against Northern Illinois, win. Home against Rutgers, win. At Wisconsin, I think that's going to be a loss. At Indiana, I think that's going to be a win. I think Indiana takes that step back. Home against Michigan State, that's a win. At Nebraska, that's a win. Home against Northwestern, that's a win. At Penn State, that was a toss-up, so I'm going to say a loss just because it's on the road. At Maryland, that's a win. At Ohio State, that's a loss. So that takes Michigan from 2-4 to either 9-3 or a 10-win season, 10-2, depending on how that Penn State game goes. You heard me. That was my last team that I'm going to talk about. But honorable mention goes to Penn State. I think they get a huge bounce back as well. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.